Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. Welcome to the Connecting with Coincidence radio show with Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, bringing together the world's synchronicity experts to help you use meaningful coincidences to develop spiritually, psychologically, and practically. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence into your web browser to find the book, website, Psychology Today blog, YouTube channel, and Facebook page. And now, here is the host of the Connecting with Coincidence radio show, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD.
Yeah. Welcome to CC with BB, Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD. Let's talk about your data double. Your data double is currently being formed by the immense trail of data created by your online activities. Read those lengthy permissions each social media company asks you to sign. They own your information. Every time you order from Amazon, reserve an Airbnb, or research quantum physics, you leave digital traces. China, for example, is ranking its citizens on economic, behavioral, and social criteria. Each person is being given a number based upon their transaction histories, internet search reports, social contacts, and behavioral records, including reprimands of any sort. The Chinese people will be judged by the online company they keep. Our dependence on digital information sharing is being co-opted by data gathering institutions to make each of us a member of their digital world. For them, our digital doubles are becoming us. You don't have to accept their definition of your reality. The opposite of digital is analog. Digital is discrete, separate. Analog is smooth, continuous. Digital relies on square waves. Analog relies on sine waves. We have up until now been inhabiting an analog world of trees and clouds and smiles and touch and interpersonal energy, all requiring interpretation to find their meaning. We are now in a battle for how we define reality. Is it going to be analog or digital? Are you a number or a wide-ranging set of feelings? Coincidence interpretation requires analog thinking. How similar are the two incidents of a coincidence? What makes the similarity and what does it mean? Defining similarity is still difficult for computer algorithms with their black and white language. Coincidence meaning relies on our analog ability, our intuition, our feelings. By paying attention to coincidences, we can divert ourselves from becoming digital selves to remain and expand our analog selves. Our guest today is Dr. Frank Pasciuti, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and certified hypnotherapist, and who is also a colleague of mine and a very good friend. He received his PhD from Michigan State University and maintains a part-time private practice in Charlottesville, Virginia. Over his 40 years of conducting psychotherapy, Dr. Pasciuti developed a subspecialty of clinically working with clientele who have undergone exceptional experiences like near-death experiences, psychic phenomena, or paranormal anomalies. These clinical experiences led to his new book, Crysalis Crisis: How Life's Ordeals Can Lead to Personal and Spiritual Transformation. The book just came out. We're talking about it. And Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Beitman. I appreciate being on. And I thought that was a very articulate and sobering introduction to the world of analog kind of life versus the digital. That's a little scary, isn't it?
It is. I'm glad you liked it. Your book is titled Crysalis Crisis. How did you choose this title?
Well, I came across a little story which I use in my preface about a little girl who is watching the process of a caterpillar morph into a butterfly, and she notices at one stage of that process the butterfly is trying to free itself from the cocoon, and it's struggling to get free. And so she was thinking that maybe it needs some help. And she touches it, of course, to try to help it anyway. And, of course, after touching it, the butterfly falls to the ground and dies. She's devastated, and as the story goes, she goes inside and tells her mom about this incident. And the mom says, oh, dear, the butterfly needed to struggle because not only does it free itself from the cocoon, but it strengthens its wings for flight. And I thought that's a lovely metaphor for what we do when we're trying to emancipate from a crisis in our life. We go through the changes or have our version of a meltdown, you might say. And as we move through the process, there's a pivoting point where maybe we have the opportunity to reflect back on what that whole crisis entailed. And oftentimes, with some struggle, we may find that it actually forced us to have to bear down and develop certain key areas of our development as humans. And so the struggle itself leads to our strengthening, our flight through life. So I thought it was nice to use as a metaphor for the 10 key areas I focus on in the book, where crises can lead to struggles in any one or a number of those areas.
I'm struck by the metaphor of the butterfly needs to struggle and to strengthen its wings so it can fly. That's such a nice image.
Yes, I love that too.
In your upbringing has tuned you into things that most people don't get tuned into, and one thing that it led to, as you just describe in your book, is the dream before your sister's wedding. And how that may have been influenced by your upbringing. Could you tell us about that dream, and how do you think that happened with your mother and your sister?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd step back a little further in time and say that I grew up in a family where two things were, I would say, a little more, a little different than many people. One is I was born to a mom who had MS and was in a wheelchair 10 years before, and I think her search to try to understand life and body-mind relationships, and also at first thinking she had Lou Gehrig's disease, also did a lot of research about death and survival, and that led her, along with her a couple of brothers and other relatives, to join an organization called the Rosicrucians, and that is a non-sectarian organization, mystical organization, where a lot of information is provided about psychic capacities, inherent potentials in humans, and just an overall notion of evolution over lifetimes. And the idea of reincarnation. So that kind of was always there in my family, as well as an openness to psychic experience, which goes back to even my mother's father, who was out of the 18th century, left Italy, and was attuned to that whole 18th century movement that gave rise to William James and Frederick Myers and their ideas of psychic phenomena and developing that whole investigative area of study. So for me, I was open to these phenomena, and lo and behold, when I was about 17, my sister, only sibling, had a wedding, and my parents, it was a big thing in our family. I'm sure my parents worked really hard to come up with the money for this event, and it was a significant event, and my father had sort of said to me, make sure when everybody's coming to the church that you walk Grandma, his mother, down the aisle. And my grandmother was like 4'9" and very petite, and so she needed some literal looking over, I guess, in my father's eyes. But anyway, I had a dream the night before that I am walking up the side aisle of the church, looking to the center, and I'm walking to the back of the church, and I notice that my grandmother's already being escorted down the aisle, and I feel this moment of like anxiety, like, oh my God, my father's only wish for me to do that, and I didn't fulfill it. And then the dream continues. I walk into the back of the church, and I see my sister under what looks like a spotlight in her wedding dress, just looking beautiful as if she were on stage. And the dream ended, but it was very impressionable. I told my mother about it, and she said, "Oh, that's interesting," because we grew up also sharing our dreams with my mother, who was very interested in dream interpretation. So as it turns out, on the day of the wedding, my brother-in-law's best man and he was staying at a hotel in town, got our tuxes mixed up. Somebody delivered the wrong tux. And so before the wedding, as we're getting dressed, I'm realizing this tux is too long for me. It's not mine. I call him up and I said, okay, look, what do you want to do? You have my tux, I have yours. He said, let's meet in the church up in the front, and we'll just go where the priests, I forget what they call that area, where the priests and the choir boys and the altar boys get changed, and we'll just change and we'll be fine. So he, not from town, shows up a little bit late, and lo and behold, we change. We both put on our suits, and because he was late and because we had to do that whole pre-wedding exchange of clothing, I literally walk up the side aisle, and just as I imagined in my dream, there was my grandmother walking down the center of the aisle, and I'm thinking, wow, this really happened. And I walk up to the back of the church, and there's my sister standing in front of a window where just at that time the sun was coming through the window, and she was in that sun glow. So I told my mother about it the next day, and she had known that I had had that dream, and she said, yeah, well, that was a precognitive dream, and those happen, and the more you pay attention to your inner life, the more likely you're going to register those subtle impressions, but not to get carried away with yourself. So that was my first experience with a phenomena that many people would question as to whether it's valid or not. So it drove it home to me that these things really do happen.
Well, that's a beautiful illustration of how upbringing can influence the way we think about things. And there's your mother encouraging you to know this is a reality, and not trying to encourage you to get too caught up in them, which now resulted in a book that's quite useful, and we'll go into it more in our next segment. You're listening to Connecting with Coincidence with your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Our host is Dr. Frank Pasciuti, and he is the author of the book Crysalis Crisis.
I loved him, like no one else I've ever loved in my life. Loved him, how I loved him. When he was in the building, I could really feel his presence. I melted into his arms.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shamans worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Path Home Shamanic Art School proudly presents the Gathering of Shaman 2019 Fall Retreat, Manifestation Samhain. Join me, certified shamanic instructor Gwilda Wiyaka, in the magnificent Colorado Mountains this November 2nd and 3rd for a life-changing event. Participate in unique teachings and ceremonies that'll put the power and magic of shamanic manifestation into your hands. Sit in circle with like-minded individuals, sharing group energy and the power it generates. Classes will be held in a facility next to the beautiful, majestic Arkansas River, further empowering the experience. Space is limited, so reserve your spot today. For more information, visit findyourpathhome.com or email touchin@findyourpathhome.com.
Is our mental atmosphere, just as we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Breathe in ideas.
Welcome back to CC with BB. Our guest today is Frank Pasciuti, author of Crysalis, Crisis. And Frank covers a lot in his book, but one of the phrases or quotes that he uses that struck me was a quote that said that religion is someone else's experience, spirituality is your own experience. Frank, I think that's you got that from Deepak Chopra. I think that's a very good idea that I'd ask you to tell us more about.
Well, I think when I understand spirituality, I think of it as a direct experience of spirit, the dimension, the subtle dimension that we're all, that it comprises a part of who we are. It's all around us and within us, and so many different religions have tried to define that. But what happens, I think, is that many of the religions, because they're products of humans, even if they're inspired humans, they can get us to having to think along a certain line. But when you start having a direct experience with spirit, and by that I mean, like for instance, somebody who has a near-death experience, they have a personal experience where their awareness is outside their body, and they start recognizing that, hey, I have this dimension of me, and I like to refer to as spirit, which is not solely dependent on the brain or the physical body, and that other experiences may also be had where people will sometimes, after the death of a significant other, they'll behold their spirit, and so there's that sense of spirituality can be more than just, what we've been told by various religions. And I think we need to disentangle those, because oftentimes people will say, I don't want to be getting into religion. I want to be able to just say, go my own way. Well, you don't have to intermingle those. You could say, I still believe in the fact that I am spirit also, besides physicality at this point in time. And I can have direct experiences of spirit, whether or not I define God or whether or not I belong to a particular community of religious belief.
Very good. How did you get into being clinically focused on people who have near-death experiences and other extraordinary experiences?
Well, because of that background that I mentioned earlier, I was always kind of curious about whether or not, even though I had my own experience with the wedding experience, I was always curious as to whether I had been indoctrinated by my family in a way to believe these things were true, and some of the concepts that were, surround them, like reincarnation or out-of-body experiences. And so what happened, I found myself pivoting after college, whether or not I wanted to pursue a field in business administration, which I studied in college. And when I really found myself reading, I was reading mystical areas of, philosophy, and particularly fascinated by the paranormal experiences people have had. And at one point, I just made a very definite decision. I thought, this is my passion. This is where I'm interested in. And then I thought very rationally, which field would most likely enable me to learn more about these experiences, particularly differentiating maybe the ones that were valid from ones that were maybe byproducts of pathological experiences, like schizophrenia. Maybe people were hallucinating, maybe people were delusional, fraudulent, whatever. But there seemed to be enough evidence and enough credible people writing about these phenomena that I wanted to be able to differentiate that. And so in my second year of my doctoral program, a fellow comes into the University Counseling Center and announcing that he was afraid he was the angel of death. And so one of my colleagues, we had this intake process where all the staff people would come together, and somebody would do an intake, whether they could pick the person up or not. They had to present him to the group of therapists to see if anybody else would pick him up. And he also, the intake person said this fellow also had a near-death experience. And this is 1978, 79. The book Life After Life had just come out, Raymond Moody's book, and I was familiar with that, both about that phenomena, the near-death experience, as well as what I had read.
And Raymond Moody's book's about reincarnation, to be clear.
Yeah, in Life After Life, where he was very specifically talking about the near-death experience. And also I had read other books, or other materials about astral projection and the idea that the spirit or your awareness can be outside your body, out-of-body experiences. So long story short, that fella presented a real challenge for me, because here I was in a conventional clinical psychology PhD program, and I was blessed to have two supervisors, one an individual supervisor and a group supervisor, who were very open to my picking this case up and helping me differentiate, what was valid from what might have thought to be a byproduct of some kind of pathology. And so that was the first time I had someone who had an extraordinary experience, both in NDE, but also some subsequent precognitions in dreams that were substantiated and validated by other people.
Yeah, and that it's almost like we can look back and see a nice line of experiences that got you to being able to and wanting to write this book. And one of the experiences that you had was running into Stanislav Grof's book, talking about spiritual emergency. Could you tell us how he defined that and what it means to you?
Well, what was nice about Grof's book was he had a way of looking at many of these extraordinary experiences, people who have near-death experiences, people who maybe had an out-of-body experience, people who have paranormal experiences, people who have what are called past life memories coming back or breaking through in various states, whether they're meditating or dreaming. And so he labeled those spiritual emergencies, which was nice because they can be treated differently than if somebody has other, rather than say these are, again, products of, either sort of a brain that's not functioning well or some symptom of some other form of pathology. He said they needed to be treated differently. And so as a clinical psychologist, I started developing a subspecialty of working with people who had these kinds of phenomena. And oftentimes they come in themselves, and they're like, other than the fact that they know that I'm open to this without, prejudging them as, crazy, they come in and often themselves say, I'm wondering whether I'm losing my mind or whether this experience was real, because many times people are not familiar with paranormal phenomena and they worry that they are losing their mind. So I do a very traditional and conventional assessment to make sure that they aren't, going through some form of psychosis. But when they're not, they are really hungry for information. They want to know, how is it that their mind can work this way? How is it they could have awareness and of something that doesn't happen in the typical way we understand time and space? Or how could they be outside their body and looking back at their body in a near-death experience? What is it where does awareness reside? Where does memory reside? So these are fascinating questions, and I try to build an explanatory model in the book which moves from more conventional kinds of areas of growth as an outgrowth, or maybe just in terms of focusing it on crisis, because usually it amplifies the area that maybe requires development. But I also bridge it over into the spiritual emergencies, because I see them all on a continuum of consciousness.
The phrase spiritual emergency has a double meaning to me. Besides that, it like going to the emergency room, there's a problem, but it's also the emergence of the spiritual.
I agree. That's an excellent interpretation. I think that was something that Groff had mentioned. There's an emergence of a potential that we have within us, and that oftentimes when it does come into awareness, because it's so foreign, can be frightening. But if one works with it, it may very well be an area that it's not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough, if you will.
Yeah, it's a breakthrough. It emerges from that experience.
Yes.
How do you differentiate between what might be called psychotic and what the kind of experiences you're describing?
Well, I think that sometimes when people have these spiritual emergencies, they can present as a transient psychosis, and they do need help stabilizing, and sometimes even an antipsychotic drug for a brief period may help them ground. But there's other ways of grounding. But it's so upsetting that they can feel like they're losing their mind, and may very well look to a clinician like they are going through a brief psychotic episode. But it's not a persistent state. It's something that's transitory. Like, there's situations where people maybe go to intense retreats and meditate all the time, or somebody is taking a drug like LSD and they activate maybe some of these dormant potentials, which can make them seem crazy. Even in the literature about shamans, it's often found that in their early years and maybe even teenage years, shamans can look like they're going through a schizophrenic episode, but actually what's happening for them is they are awakening to this deeper potential that resides in our unconscious. And when it comes to the surface, it can cause a great deal of struggle and confusion that to outside people may look like they're losing their mind. But actually, once they stabilize and learn how to manage that flow, it actually can be quite a benefit.
That's what you're offering people, the ability to be able to do that.
Please return to Laura Baxter and release it on a helium balloon. England, Staffordshire, June 2001. A 10-year-old who really needs a friend. 10 days later in Wiltshire, her balloon is found 140.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Synchronicity sisters, emotional twins, each suffering from abusive men and needing to break away. Synchronicity sisters, emotional twins, a wrong but right phone number dialed, put them together. Through similarity,
Well, welcome back to CC with BB. I'm your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, and our guest today is Dr. Frank Pasciuti, a psychologist who helps people deal with spiritual emergencies. He describes what he does in his book, Crysalis, Crisis, and we're talking about some of the people and ideas behind what he does. Frank, one of the people in your book was recently married, and then something happened on the beach with her and her husband. Could you tell us about that and how she came to you and how you helped her?
Sure. Well, this young woman, she actually was referred to me by the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies that researches after-death reincarnation and mediumship and a variety of things. So, and become sometimes people who have experiences they don't understand that are of a paranormal, exceptional kind of way will reach out to them, and that has been a very beneficial thing for me because they'll often refer them to me in the community because what these people are looking for really is a therapist or somebody to help them understand their experiences, whereas this program researches more than does therapy with people. So in either case, she came to me, and her experience was actually, it was before she got married. She was out in an island with the love of her life, and they had this wonderful evening, and they decided when they got back to the States they were going to get married and finally just go ahead and do it. It was a beautiful evening, and they the next morning, the fellow wakes up and says, "I'm going to go out to the beach, and do you want to go for a swim? Do you want to come?" And she says, "Well, you know what? I think I'm going to want to sleep. I'll sleep in a little bit." And so about an hour after he goes out, she goes out. She sees his chair on the beach and his stuff underneath it. But she looks up and down the beach, at least initially, visually, and doesn't see him. And then she walks down the beach a little further, and there he is, face down in the water, just a little bit offshore, and he apparently had died. So this was a devastating experience for her. They had just decided to get married. Now what happened was once she, got over the initial trauma, that she started having experiences where she was feeling his presence, but more than even feeling him, these anomalous experiences started happening. She'd be watching a show where the show itself was something that was on TV, and the TV channel changer was like, a good 5 or 6 feet away, and all of a sudden the TV station would change to another station that she felt was very relevant to both the phenomena of the TV changing itself was one, but the other thing is it goes to a station that she knows that he liked to see. She also said she beheld his presence and was initially frightened.
What is that, beheld his presence?
Well, in other words, she saw what might be a spirit or ghostly presence of him, in a sort of subtle form in the room, and had this sense of like a rippling, sort of not quite tangible element of his appearance, and that scared her at first. But she said it was very much real, and she was very much awake at the time. And then she also started having a number of coincidences occurring, which had relevance to him. And now let me tell you, when she came to see me first, she was one of these people who thought she was losing her mind, which she wasn't. She was not only very solid, but she was in a field of a profession that was very grounded, very, very hard science kind of field, and had, even as a personality, a very somewhat previously skeptical attitude about these kinds of phenomena. But what was fascinating, she wasn't super skeptical. She had had 2 previous near-death experiences in her life that she'd never shared with anybody. And the research on NDEs are that people who have NDEs, oftentimes afterwards, they gain the ability to seemingly have more psychic phenomena happen, like precognitions. It's almost as if the loosening of the tether of their awareness or spirit to their bodies in an NDE seems to enable them to be able to register the subtle phenomena of like precognitions or clairvoyance or clairaudience. So she was a good example of that. And, we worked together, and, at first, of course, she was grieving. So she was an interesting case. And when she came to see me, I realized, first order of business is take a very conventional approach, which is to help her deal with the grieving. And then after that, she wanted to pivot into trying to understand more about these kinds of phenomena.
I have some people on this radio show and know a couple who have had manic episodes. And these manic episodes are not like short-term things that happen and then they go away, and what you're describing and the people who come to see you, but instead they can go on for days and then recur. And so what they have told me is that they have the typical manic episode of like rapid speech, rapid thoughts, a lot of hyperactivity, very little need for sleep. And they also have parapsychological phenomena. Have you seen people like that, and then how do you handle them?
Well, that's a very interesting clinical question, because there's an element of manic psychosis, so you'd have to disentangle what is valid from, what is a product of the state of their mind at the time. But I've often wondered whether intensification of emotion sometimes can bring about what we would call psychic phenomena. The classic case of the woman whose child is caught under a car or something, and then the woman finds a superhuman strength to lift something that she would not normally be able to lift, or people who are faced with real extreme experiences, like even people, by the way, who are imagining they're going to die, like for instance, their car is racing towards a tree, they'll have an out-of-body experience before they hit the tree, before they even have, experience any kind of clinical near-death phenomena. So, I do think that maybe the manic state can amp up our capacities in other areas like emotion, and might actually precipitate a psychic experience like that. But again, the challenge is disentangling, what is something that's going on that is a symptom of pathology, and what is a valid psychic experience. And that whole area of clinical parapsychology tries to address those differences.
And I'm talking not about clinical psychology, really. I'm talking about clinical psychiatry, because the manic people don't come to people like you. They go to emergency rooms and they get put in inpatient units. And what what you're talking about, I think, needs to be applied to psychiatric treatment, an attempt like Stanislav Grof, who was a psychiatrist or is a psychiatrist, was able to do. And making that transition within psychiatry seems to be very difficult because it's embedded more in medicine and the more traditional ways of thinking. And there's some craziness in the people, too. There is something off about them. So go ahead.
I was going to say, well, interestingly, as we both know, you as a psychiatrist, there's a bias towards trying to understand phenomena through a physicalist basis or through understanding medicine, which goes way beyond the kind of training I've had as a clinical psychologist. But actually, clinical psychology is even more resistant to opening to the possible or the validity of some of these psychic experiences, because there's always a diagnosis that can explain it away. If somebody has a past life experience or is really like experiencing like as somebody who's a medium, they might start saying, well, they're multiple personality disorder. Or if somebody is experiencing a psychic phenomenon, they might say they're delusional. So there's a handle that you can throw at these people if you want to pathologize it. But the challenge is to say, at least start with an open mind that these psychic phenomena are valid for some people, and that the research, which has been done over the years, very tight research, has proven that they're really, that ESP, if you will, psychic phenomena, does exist. We don't know how it works yet, but the fact that it does actually happen, I think at least would incline, or you would want to encourage people to say, keep an open mind. Not everybody might be experiencing some form of pathology, but then there's also the case where both could be happening, right? I mean, and then it's even more challenging if you got somebody who's experiencing some sort of transitory psychosis or dips down into those levels of the unconscious where they're actually registering psychic phenomena, but also they get lost in there, like might be the case of a schizophrenic, like what's real and what's not real.
And we're coming near the end of this segment, and the problem is not data about whether, say, telepathy exists or even psychokinesis. It's the resistance in the general mind of medicine and science as well, and psychology as well, to want to ground what they see and hear from patients in a materialistic, brain-based ways of thinking. And some of what you're writing about, and what I think your attempt is, and what the Division of Perceptual Studies is to try to find ways to be able to change the mindsets of people who are resistant to these ideas. And I'm not sure how successful we are being, but I think we keep knocking away at it. You're coming to the end of this segment. You're listening to Connecting with Coincidence. I'm your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Our guest is Frank Pasciuti, author of Crysalis Crisis.
Please return to Laura Baxter and release it on a helium balloon. England, Staffordshire, June 2001. A 10-year-old who really needs a friend.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hides' life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.
Is our mental atmosphere, just as we breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide.
Welcome back to CC. Yes, I'm your host, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, and we are talking with Frank Pasciuti, author of Crysalis, Crisis. And Frank, in one of the key questions I have and other people will have about what you're writing is about what is consciousness. It's such a tough subject, but I think we need to pay attention to that question here.
Yeah, well, that is the million-dollar question, because I think we're all like the saying of a lot of blind people poking at the elephant and trying to understand the whole mass of the concept of consciousness. But from the very field that we are most familiar with. For me, I tend to think of consciousness as a way of understanding the foundation of everything. And it's fair to say that in a more secular world, that maybe consciousness that we're all talking about, I sort of share the notion of a pantheistic notion of consciousness as that which underlies everything. What Jung and Pauli, Wolfgang Pauli, the Nobel physicist, and Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, refer to as the unus mundus, the one ground that gives rise to everything. And I guess the shift that's going on right now is that people will, one thing is people will confuse conscious with consciousness. And it's unfortunate that they're both very similar and use the same beginning of the word there. But my idea of consciousness and how I use it as the foundation that gives rise to both awareness, gives rise to mentality, gives rise to physicality, and that in my book, the 10 areas and the 10 keys that I focus on, I see as the range of consciousness accessible to humans, which goes everywhere, includes everything from the physical dimension that we're in and are a part of, all the way through more subtle dimensions of spirit awareness or intuition, and all along the way, the ability to cognate, have intellectual understanding, emotions, and many different areas. But consciousness, in a more religious concept, might be equivalent to God. What people would say is God, that which is all around us, within us, and gives rise to everything. So that is, I think the word consciousness goes down easier for the scientific-minded folks who are, quantum physicists who want to talk about how consciousness needs to be there to bring a wave or a probability wave into a particle. So I think the world is saying, if we can find a way to understand the greater existence of all things in a very expanded way, a cosmic consciousness that can embrace everything, that's one of the ways people are using the word consciousness, and one of the ways that I tend to use it in the book.
And one of the people that you base some of your thinking on is Tyler Desjardins, who talked about teleological drive. I think teleological drive is a very, very important idea to keep in mind. We tend to think of cause as like from the past. I mean, two things come together, and that's what makes it happen. But teleology is something else. Would you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, my understanding of it, and I have a bias I have a bias towards developmental psychology, which is I believe, and one of the first impressions I had in the field, which really sold me on becoming a clinical psychologist, was the idea of Carl Rogers talked about we're always in the act of becoming, and that's very similar to teleology, where we're always evolving. And so when I think of these 10 keys that I identify, I think of us as learning to gain increased mastery, and I will say that I use a concept, or I hold tenable the idea of reincarnation, that this development can occur over lifetimes, and that we bring with us a continued a progression of experiences where we can learn and gain greater mastery of these 10 keys, but that we're always moving towards the more subtle awareness and the purer state of spirit, and that over time we become conscious of the range of consciousness that is available to us but maybe not realized yet. So there's where I like the idea of development over time. It's kind of optimistic that we're always, even if it looks like we're going backwards sometimes, like in crisis, you might say, wow, this looks like a step back. But if you learn something from the crisis, or even difficult times politically or socially, or the upheavals over history, the idea is that, are we expanding awareness? Are we continuing to evolve, even if it seems really slow, or even if there's always going to be people all along that continuum? You can't say that is the mean developmental level that we are at this time of our evolution of humanity. Is it greater than it was, 2,000, 4,000 years ago in terms of a mass of people? So it speaks to everything leads to growth, or all things are leading to good.
And I think that's the main message of your book. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, and if you break down each crisis, and it doesn't have to be crisis that leads you to seek growth in these 10 key areas. I use crisis because it amplifies. One is when people come to therapy, as you know, if they're in crisis, they tend to make change greater than if they're just curious about therapy. And when I use these case examples and different ways in which I use my own experience or the experiences of others, it's usually it's done in the context of crisis, because crisis amplifies them. But ultimately, there's an optimistic theme to the book, which is even the crisis that you're in, when you look back at it, once you navigate through the initial difficult period of adjustment, you may see that it forced you to have to develop certain of these key areas to be able to navigate through it and to integrate the experience.
It's important to have this optimism. And there's been that optimism, generally speaking, about synchronicity, that it's kind of all good, which is a phrase that's out there. But a lot of coincidences are not all good. They have multiple effects, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. What about with spiritual emergencies? Are there any downsides that you experience with people?
Well, that's a very good experience. That's a very good point, because I'm trying to think of the book that I cite where somebody wrote a book about negative near-death experiences, for example, which would be considered a spiritual emergency. That sometimes when people are swamped by the openness and awareness that can accompany a near-death experience, it's not always necessarily positive. They may be, it may be, there is a shadow side to our personalities. There is a darker side that's potential to humanity also. So sometimes it may very well be a byproduct of something very dark that breaks through awareness. But yet again, I guess I'm an optimist to think that even if it's deep and dark, and there's a purgation going on, if you will, that there's still a chance that, that if you're swamped by a negative experience and it reflects your lower self or your shadow self, bringing light to it or examining it may diffuse it or may release it. And behind that, I guess I believe that there's the higher self. So even in the dark experiences, and maybe initially they're experienced as negative, what lies behind that and underneath it, I think, may be the teleological drive for growth.
It's optimistic. Underneath it all, there's something positive happening, and I think it's an important way of thinking about the world instead of giving up. And I'm wondering how your book is being received. It just came out a little while ago, and how people can get a hold of it.
Well, sure. Well, part of the book being received is getting the word out that it exists. Although the people that I have spoken to in other interviews, they seem to be responding positively to it. What's interesting is in the professional community, I think the first part of the book, I have 4 sections. The first 2 are more conventional. And so therapists in general may say, okay, this is a nice articulation of, the more familiar ways in which people grow through the more foundational and personal areas. And they yet may find the second half of the book where I start getting into spiritual emergencies and or provide a model for understanding consciousness. So I see different things. Others who have not given much thought to this will find the whole book may be interesting because there's so much to be learned about just the conventional ways in which we grow and the kinds of typical problems people bring into therapy. And it may, at first glance, the second half of the book may really open them to concepts they've never given much thought to at all. So, it's more about, people have seemed to be responding pretty positively to it. I think there's something in there for everyone. It's certainly a very broad, the 10 key areas I identify are pretty much very broad, and I try to get my arms around a lot so that I think people enjoy the layman-friendly way I write it, because I write it the way I would speak to somebody in my office. I don't want to sound like some off in the clouds intellectual. I want to always make sure that I articulate what I'm saying in a way that's comprehensible to everybody.
I think that's true. I think you've written that way, and you've included a lot of your own personal experiences in it, which I think helps the reader identify with you and therefore identify with some of the experiences. Well, we're come to the end of this segment. Please tell people how they can get a hold of your book, Crysalis Crisis.
Sure. Well, one is you can go on Amazon. It's there. If you go to Google and just put in Crysalis Crisis, you're going to get my name You could also go to my website, which is frankpasciuti.com, but people might have to make sure you spell that last name right, Pasciuti, and you'll get all the information you need to know about me and the book.
I love